All right, great. Hi again, everybody. This is Caroline Spick, and I'm here with Nicole Jardim for our free call on Get Your Hormones on Board for 2015. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Nicole.
Hi again. Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
This is we're recording. I'm so happy that you're here too, and I'm so happy that everyone who's calling in live is with us as well. I'm so excited for this call. And I'm just going to do a little introduction. So my name is Caroline Spickson, and as most of you know, I'm a life coach, and I focus primarily on helping women align their lives with their true desires and work, love, and health. And I'm so happy, you're all here this evening joining our call, again, on getting your hormones back on board. And we had over 150 women sign up for this call, and so it's so clear to me that there is so much interest in this world of hormones and sort of debunking our bodies and really getting into alignment and into balance. And that makes me really happy because it's definitely a topic that has been so relevant in my own life. And so I'm just really, really excited to share all of these amazing things with all of you. So before we dive in, I just, again, want to officially introduce my dear friend and mentor and colleague, Nicole Jardim. And a little background on Nicole for those of you who don't know who she is. She's a young women's hormonal health coach and the creator of 6 Year Period, which is a series of programs that empower women to reclaim their health in a natural way while also having a ton of fun. And I can totally vouch for both Nicole's expertise and the fact that she knows how to have fun and how she, incorporates both this kind of like confusing world of hormones with a sense of humor. And I think that's just what makes you so unique, Nicole. So I'm so happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I know. I try. This is serious stuff. We need to make this at least a little bit fun.
Yeah, and digestible, and not so scary, because I think sometimes our health can feel so like threatening and like it's totally out of our control, so I think it's great to put a fun twist on it.
It sure is. Agreed. I know.
So personally, I'm so excited to share this information with you tonight because it's a topic that is by far, again, not talked about enough. And in my personal journey towards optimizing my health, which, included an apprenticeship with Nicole actually last year, because I just knew that I wanted to bring this information not only to myself, but to more women out there and more women who are coming, into my coaching business as well. And I just saw this as such a bigger issue than what I initially thought it would be. And so understanding my hormones for me personally has made, one of the biggest differences in just reclaiming my own health and well-being. And so with that said, welcome to Nicole and welcome to all of you ladies who are listening. Thanks so much for joining our call. And I would love to get us started with a little intention and a tuning in exercise, I call it, so that we can all be really present for this call. And so before we jump into the questions that I have prepared for you, Nicole, and all the wonderful questions that we actually got in advance from many of the women who are on the call, I would love for all of us to take a moment and really become present in the here and now. I know how hectic some of our lives are, and so I would love for all of us to fully arrive and settle into the space together, because although, we're all sitting at our individual homes all over the world, we're still connected energetically through being women and, of course, through being on this call together. So let's all sit in a comfortable position and place our hands, gently on our lower belly. And if you can, and if you feel like it, you can close your eyes. Of course, make sure it feels comfortable and take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And for the next few breaths, as you're exploring, see if you can feel the air traveling all the way down through your nasal cavity and through your throat and through your chest and even past your diaphragm and your belly, all the way to where your hands are gently resting. And I want you to visualize the air coming in, down, becomes warmer and smoother. Maybe, it even changes color from like a light blue or invisible to a golden bright light that really floods your pelvic area and your upper body with life, and then gently leaves again, traveling up through your body and gently out your mouth. And so feel your body and connect with, the different parts that are all part of really you, especially your pelvic area, since we're talking about your female hormones today in particular. And see if you can send some, grateful, loving energy to yourself and to your amazing, complex, and beautiful body through your breath and through the life that you're soaking in. So I'm just going to give you a few moments to really play with this image. And then when we're all ready, we can come back into the present space. You can open your eyes and move your hands and keep breathing, of course. All right. Hope this felt good to everybody. I love doing this exercise of, swooping out my body with fresh golden air and flooding it with this warm light all the way down to my pelvic area to really embrace all parts of my upper body. All right, Nicole, are you ready to start talking hormones?
I am. I'm so relaxed now. I can't wait.
Good. I'm glad. All right. So because, we're just coming out from this sort of stressful period of the year, the end of the year, the completion of, goals from 2014 and kind of building up anxiety of what comes next in the new year and resolutions and all this stuff. I'm curious if you can explain to us a little bit more about the connection between stress and our sex hormones, like how stress actually affects our body, our hormones, and our fertility specifically. Like how are all of those connected?
Yeah. By the way, you just broke up a little bit, and I don't know if it's on my end or not, but I just, I wanted you to know that. It's just, It wasn't like I couldn't not hear you. I understood what you said. Yeah. Speaking of stress, I feel like the December is the worst month for women. It's supposed to be the happiest time of the year, and yet I hear from women over and over again, and maybe you do too, Caroline, that they're up until, 2 a.m. wrapping presents, and they're going to all these holiday parties, and they're drinking too much, and they're probably eating too much that they probably shouldn't be eating. I mean, the list goes on, and there's school things going on. I mean, it's everything. And I feel like it's everything from the whole year condensed into 30 days in December. And
yes.
Right. And travel too, of course. Let's not even talk about that part. But what I want women to understand is that this external stress that we experience, our bodies are, they've been around for a very long time, thousands, millions of years. And what happened in the last 50 years is that our external environment has changed so much that we no longer, it's almost unrecognizable, I think, to our bodies, because in millions of years, our bodies have evolved very slowly, and then in the last 50 years, we've kind of wanted to force them into being okay or adapting to the amount of that basically habitual stress that we experience, and we're not doing a very good job of that, or at least our bodies aren't. So when we have all of this external stress, so we're talking about mental stress, which is work stuff, or anything along those lines. Emotional stress, which, can be work things too, but usually that's relationships and things along of that nature. And then there's also physical stress as well. And we don't talk so much about that. But, when we're talking about physical stress, we're talking about the food that we're eating. And, if we're living in a really cold environment, that, cold can really stress people out. And in fact, extreme heat can really stress people out too. We just don't realize that it's happening on an internal level. So anyway, the point is that all of this stuff that we've experienced in the last 4 to 6 weeks for many of us because of the holidays, it takes a pretty big toll. So what's happening is our brains are processing everything that we're experiencing, every external event. And our brains are intimately connected to every part of our bodies, obviously, in particular, our endocrine and hormonal systems. So what's happening is our adrenal glands, which if you're sitting in a chair right now and you just put your hands behind your back and you press where, kind of in mid-back range where your kidneys would be, your adrenals sit on top of your kidneys. And so what's happening there is the adrenals are that first line of defense when you are experiencing stress. So your brain will immediately talk to your adrenals and say, this is what's going on right now. And your adrenals will say, okay, this is either okay or this is dangerous. And unfortunately for us, like I said, we haven't evolved very well in the last 50 years in terms of what we perceive as being stressful and dangerous. Our bodies really can't tell the difference between, being stuck in traffic or having a fight with a loved one, and, being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, literally. So our bodies perceive danger almost, across the board, regardless of the type of stress. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, so fascinating that it can't differentiate between the different types of stressors, because I think a lot of times we give ourselves a break from one stressor, but really what we're doing is we're running into another stressor, but we don't think of those two maybe as the same thing. And so what you mentioned earlier with the habitual stress, I think is really, really stands out to me. And I think it's really important for people also to hear that we are in like consistent stress, even if it's, giving yourself a break by like rushing to the gym and working out really hard, that can actually be a stressor for the body as well, even though we tell ourselves that this is maybe like self-care, but it's not really maybe what we need at that very moment. And so we go from one stressor to the next, to the next, to the next. And that is really the biggest difference in today's society versus in, like a couple hundred years ago society.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, that really is the issue, is that I think for many of us, we're just not aware of how much stress is having on us, or like you said, working out really hard at the gym. So essentially what's happening is, we haven't learned to differentiate it, or at least our bodies haven't yet. Maybe in another 50 years, you never know. And so as a result, we are, living in a state of chronic low-grade stress. Our adrenals are constantly, and this is the connection here, our adrenals are constantly producing cortisol, which, and other hormones as well, other stress hormones and other sex hormones even. But cortisol would be that main stress hormone. And so when we're talking about the connection, cortisol then has conversations with other hormones. So what's happening then is, if we're having lots of stress, we're producing lots of cortisol over a long period of time. Cortisol can actually inhibit the function of your thyroid. And the way it does that is it actually sort of messes with your hypothalamus, which is in your brain. And your hypothalamus then says to your thyroid, okay, well, we don't need this much thyroid hormone. So your thyroid starts to produce less of the T3 and T4 that you need in order to have a good metabolism and, have thick hair and have skin that's not constantly dry and, be able to, there's so many things like lose weight easily, all of these kinds of issues that people experience when they have a thyroid problem is likely linked back to just extended periods of stress at some point in their lives. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is our ovaries. So a lot of cortisol can actually inhibit the function of our ovaries. So if you think about this from a historic point of view, our bodies, like I said, right, we don't know the difference between running away from a tiger and it just basically being at work all day, stressed out, being stuck in meetings and whatnot. So when our bodies experience this, well, this is dangerous, or this is not a time that we should be ovulating, or maybe we should delay ovulation. And this is what happens to so many women. That's why, this lack of periods or irregular periods has become such an epidemic, I think, in our modern world, because our ovaries are just saying, okay, well, it doesn't seem like a safe time to ovulate. And, your body knows what's good for you, and it actually is trying to work for you. We just don't realize that. We actually think, especially if we're trying to get pregnant, that our bodies are not working. And in fact, our bodies are working. They're saying this is either not a safe time to get pregnant, or it's not like the right time, at least in this time space. So what happens is it'll delay ovulation, or it will just not ovulate that month at all, and maybe wait till the next month until it has a sense that the stress, the external stress, has calmed down. So those are the main connections, I think, to our sex hormones.
Yeah, and I think it's so fascinating, and I love your approach to the whole to the whole scenario, because I think our initial reaction sometimes can be anger towards our body if our body isn't functioning right, like with the thyroid, like if our skin isn't what we want it to be, if our weight just won't come off, like that kind of thing, or with our ovaries, like if we have a really hard time, getting pregnant, getting regular periods, all that stuff, I think there can be so much anger towards our bodies. And that's why I think understanding this whole system is so valuable, because it allows us to actually join with our bodies and see why our bodies are actually acting in our own favor, and what we can do that will actually make a difference. So rather than, focusing all of our attention on the thyroid and the ovaries and maybe taking medication to try to force them to work, and ignoring, that really fundamental component of cortisol and stress, and maybe taking a look at the way we've laid out our lives, which is, actually at the root of the issue. Like that's why I love, the way you explain all of this, and your approach to really encourage women to understand their bodies and rejoin with their bodies and see how they can support them to function optimally versus force them to function optimally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could not agree with you more. I think that this is another issue that many of us experience in our modern way of living, is that we are very disconnected. And, so much of that comes back to the fact that nobody's ever taught this stuff. I mean, where would you ever learn it? I mean, I'm sure whoever's on the call, maybe you guys want to chat about this in the comments, but talk about sex education. I mean, what did you learn in sex education? I went to a Catholic high school, so I did not learn very much, that's for sure. And, so we're really not being taught this information. And I think that it's ingrained from a very young age that, we go to the doctor when something's wrong with us, and the doctor will fix us. And as we get into our 20s and 30s and health issues become a little bit more complex, especially when it is hormonal, the doctors tend to offer less and less help. And it's no fault of their own. This is the way they're trained, and that's it. And so there is definitely like a limit to what modern medicine can do for us. And so it's a matter then, as you said, Caroline, of tuning back into what's going on with your body, and just sort of checking in and learning to decipher your body's messages, because it is speaking another language practically, and you can just say, okay, well, what is my body saying to me, and what can I do to start to shift this and see if, this will get better, this condition, this issue that I'm dealing with will get better. So it is a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, that number one, like we don't learn about it in school enough. And it's at that point also kind of like a topic that's filled with shame and embarrassment, and you don't really want to hear it, because, what would that mean about you if you actually listen and are interested in it, like 11 or 12, like that's not the topic that, kids feel comfortable talking about in the way, we were raised in our society, I think. And then your point about the doctors too, like I recently talked to a friend who's a physician, and she said that, she could probably like count the hours she had about nutrition and how nutrition affects the body on like two hands. You know what I mean? And so we'll get into this next, because, what I love about your approach is that you take a really holistic and natural approach to helping our bodies heal. And so my next question for you is, besides like the obvious things to manage stress better, which we'll talk about in a moment, also kind of like diving a little bit more into the emotional aspects of everything, what can we do from a nutritional and food perspective to really support our bodies to regain that balance and that, optimal functioning? Because, again, like nutrition, like this is something that that all of us can so easily impact, because we eat every single day. We make choices about our food every single day. So what are some things that we can do from a nutritional and food perspective to support our body in managing stress and our hormonal balancing?
Yeah, it's so good. And, and it's actually a lot simpler than we think it is, which is always nice. I would say, yeah, I know, right? So that I can give all of you ladies just some basic steps that I think every one of us should be trying to do every single day. And the first thing is, you really want to be incorporating as many nutrient-dense foods into your diet as possible. So we're talking about, and my big one is just the leafy green vegetables. And you've probably heard this before, but I really can't sell these things enough. I remember years and years ago when I first got into health and wellness, I would go to the grocery store and I'd see all of these leafy greens and I just had no idea how to cook any of them. So I just sort of shied away and I never bothered. And then finally I just went for it and I bought something and I just continued to experiment. But I can't stress enough how important it is to have them in your diet, especially because they contain a lot of the B vitamins and the B complex, which is, so we've got B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B9, B12, and especially B9 and B12. So that's not B12, sorry, that's only in animal products, but B9, which is folate, which we really need to help with our hormones. Anyways, the B vitamins in general actually really help you combat stress. And you really want to be getting them from as natural a source as possible. And the leafy greens, I think, are the best way to go. So the dark ones too. So we're talking about kale and spinach and collard greens. I'm like on a serious collard greens kick right now. I don't know what's wrong with me. I used to think they were so gross, and now I can't stop eating them. So
it sounds like a nice like wintry dish and would like incorporate well into like soups and stews and all that stuff.
Oh, totally. Yeah, because they're kind of fibrous and just they're not really bitter, and you can eat them with anything. And I think they're so awesome. So all of those kinds of foods, and of course the cruciferous ones, things like bok choy and cabbage. Cabbage I know isn't really green, but they've got a lot of compounds that help to break down harmful estrogens or harmful hormones and eliminate those from your body so that the good hormones can work better or work more efficiently. So I really feel that, those nutrient-dense foods, if you can get those even into one meal a day, and especially when you're planning your meals or thinking about your meals, really think about how can I get like half of my plate as leafy green vegetables. And salads are great. However, in the wintertime, I don't think they're amazing just because you're eating something cold. And if you have the tendency towards being cold or you have a thyroid problem, you're going to be cold. So I prefer the cooked veggies much better. Anyway, so that's the first thing, I think, like the nutrient dense foods. The second thing I would say is really focus on the whole grain or like whole grains and removing sugar and refined carbohydrates. To me, this is so crucial because just as I was saying earlier, I was talking about, physical stress. Well, there's something called like internal physical stress where what's happening is you're eating something that does not agree with your body or your metabolism, and your adrenals get stressed out from that. So the food you eat can actually cause internal stress as well. So it can cause your adrenals to release cortisol. One of the biggest ones of those is refined carbohydrates, and I know what you guys know what I'm talking about, like the cookies and the cakes and the bread and all of these different kinds of things. Caroline, yeah. I know you know all about this. I know. I like drill it into every one of my clients' heads.
No, it's good. We need to hear it. Well, and I think what you actually taught me, which I thought was so interesting and which, now makes sense is we eat things that spike our insulin so that are high in, again, these, refined carbs and sugars. If our insulin spikes, that's what makes our cortisol spike. And so just knowing that connection just sort of like makes it easier for me to understand, okay, well, like what it actually like means to eat a cookie. And I'm not saying, you should never ever eat a cookie again in your life. Like that would be awful, right? But like making conscious choices on a daily basis and, enjoying things in moderation.
Totally. I mean, yeah, I'm all about the 80-20 rule. Like I'm not sitting here, on some sort of soapbox going on about, you should eat perfectly all the time, because I think eating perfectly, quote unquote, perfectly all the time is almost like an eating disorder in and of itself. I mean, we're essentially setting ourselves up for failure and disappointment if we try to do that all the time. So yes, I'm a huge proponent of the cake. Yeah. And all the guilt, right? I know. It sucks. It's horrible.
Like, I feel like that's like an emotional stressor in and of itself, right? Like if we beat ourselves up in our life, like that causes internal stress and emotional stress, maybe even more than, a small cookie would have done, so it's kind of like being like gentle with yourself. I think it's such an important component of this whole transitioning into a healthier, hormonal friendly diet is such a big part of, like, gentleness is such a big part of making that transition successfully.
Oh my goodness, I could not agree with you more. I mean, and that's one of the biggest things. I mean, yeah, we can eat these things when we want to have them and not deprive ourselves. But it's really the environment that we're eating it in and the feelings that we have around it. So if we're feeling like we shouldn't be eating something, or we're about it, or feeling bad, or feeling like we need to hide it, then that creates a whole other, I think, chemical process in your body, which, and I think that, maybe this is just me and I might be a little crazy, but I really think that the way you eat something is almost as important as what it is you're eating. So if you are eating something that yeah, don't you agree with that?
Absolutely. Like, if I, wolf down something really, really quickly while I'm on a computer and maybe on a phone and doing 5 things at the same time, I can feel myself being more bloated afterwards. And that tells me, that my digestion isn't working optimally. And so I can't absorb the nutrients that I'm eating. So I can have, like, the healthiest thing in the world, but if my body is, is too preoccupied and too stressed to even absorb all the nutrients from it, well, then the healthiest meal is pointless.
Exactly. What about the chocolate brownie, though?
And,
what if you savor that? I'm sure you're going to get the maximum nutrition from it.
Well, that's the funny thing. I feel like a lot of times, like, we kind of, like, eat those types of things that we shouldn't eat, quote unquote, in secrecy, and be like, eat them really quickly, rather than really say, like, those are especially the things that we should be savoring and, really enjoying and eating extra slow and in a calm environment.
Exactly. I know, for sure. We really should. I mean, and so, that's what, like, in coming back to, what we were talking about. So when I'm talking about the refined carbohydrates and whatnot, and what you said about, our adrenals getting stressed out, because basically when we eat something that's really processed, what happens is, our blood sugar rises really fast, right? Because it doesn't go through our digestive tract slowly. It's turned almost immediately to sugar. And when we have a lot of sugar flooding our bloodstream, our pancreas produces insulin, and insulin is going to our bloodstream as well to take that sugar out of our blood and put it into our cells and send it to our brain for fuel. Anyway, what happens is, as our blood sugar spikes up so high because our blood has been just flooded with all this glucose, and then it crashes just as fast and quickly and low as it went up, because the insulin is doing its job effectively. That is, if you have a pancreas that works well, and I'm assuming all of you do. So anyway, what then happens is you have this low blood sugar feeling, and then you feel headachy and pissed off and tired and a little bit bothered and all of these kinds of things, like moody, depressed. And this, goes on for years for so many of us, because we've not really been taught how to balance our blood sugar with our meals. And that, to me, is, the third thing would be the biggest thing of all, is to maintain stable blood sugar as often as you can, because, like I said, we all eat brownies and cookies sometimes. But the idea here is to, have lots of your veggies, like the leafy greens that I mentioned, have some unrefined carbohydrates. So these are whole grains, if that's something you're eating. Some people are paleo and don't eat grains, which is totally fine. You could try sweet potato or brown rice or quinoa, something like that. And then focus on some kind of protein. And not everyone eats animal protein, which is totally fine too. But for those of you who do, you're focusing on getting some kind of animal protein with that meal, so that you're creating a complex meal. So you've got grains, or like complex carbs, greens or veggies, and then some kind of protein. And then to add on to that, you'd want to add some fat in there as well. So something like avocado, or some nuts and seeds, or some kind of, if you cook with coconut oil, or put some olive oil on your salad or something like that. And that helps you to, first of all, when we're speaking evolutionarily, it helps your brain to realize that, there's fat in your diet, there's fat in your food. So you're not going to be starving in like an hour, because again, your brain is always looking for that. And so if you have low fat products, just get rid of them, because they're signaling to your brain that the brain's gonna get fat, but then it's not getting the fat in the food, so you're then hungry again. So it really helps to address hunger. And in fact, when I incorporated fat into my diet, I lost weight because I was no longer restricting myself in that way. So I would say that combination. Pardon?
Yeah. I was going to tell you the same thing, that, I was terrified of, eating whole fat anything, because our society forever preaches, like low fat, non-fat, like all of this stuff. At the grocery store, it's actually hard to find whole fat, just regular organic yogurt, for example, but making that switch, I kind of anticipated, I'm going to like gain weight because it's full fat, like all of this stuff. And I can totally vouch for what you just said, that I ended up actually losing weight, and just my food tasted so much better too,
Tell me about it. Oh my gosh. Do you remember the 90s? I mean, seriously, I used to eat all those stupid snack wells and like every low fat, everything I could ever find. It was ridiculous.
I mean, sugar-free, like fat-free, like everything free essentially was, what I thought was healthiest. And little did I know, I was
exactly
my hormones.
I know, right? Exactly. Seriously. I mean, that's the thing. So that's something I also want to mention too. When we have a significant amount of fat in our diet, or have more fat in our diet, it actually is really great for our hormones, because you need fat and protein for hormone building. They are literally the building blocks of your hormones. And if you do enough, eventually your reproductive hormones like estrogen and progesterone will decline, and you'll likely not get a period, or your periods will be very irregular. So this is, stuff to think about.
Yeah, fascinating. So to recap the nutritional recommendations that you just sort of gave us all as a basis, of course, everybody, is going to be different and has like their bio-individual way of dealing with food and incorporating food. But essentially, your first tip was to have nutrient-dense foods, especially leafy greens, but particularly because of the B vitamins that all of us need to calm stress and really break down estrogen effectively. And then number 2 was whole grains, like focus on the whole grains. So no sugar or refined carbs, like keeping those sort of like on the lower end of things that we consume and eat, specifically because of those blood sugar spikes and crashes that are really hard on our body and causing that internal stress. And then number 3 was to maintain a stable blood sugar, specifically with making sure that each meal has veggies, unrefined carbs, protein, and a good fat. And then number 4 was eating in a calm and loving environment, and making sure that the way you eat is just as valuable and as high quality as what you eat.
So great. You're such a nerd.
Just really good at note taking.
That was, is that it? Yeah. You recapped that really well.
Well, I just think when I'm on these pre-calls, and then I'm like, I someone to it really quick for me. So I'm trying to do that for all of our listeners.
I love it.
Let's move on.
No, that's perfect.
Good. I'm glad you appreciate it.
I do.
So from an emotional perspective, we'd already talked a little bit about, eating in a calm and loving environment, but what can we do for ourselves in order to really calm our stress response and therefore create, again, greater balance in our bodies overall, so that we can have these healthy and regular and pain-free menstrual cycles? Because I think a big component of pain is also that like emotional stress, that like external pressure and internal pressure as well, that we so often put on ourselves and feel like the environment is putting on us. So what are some sort of like things we can do from an emotional perspective to help ourselves really stay balanced and healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the biggest things is taking a bit of a technology break. For a lot of people, our phones are in our faces 24/7, and we're staring at computers all day. And I find that we are all so distracted and not present, and myself included on a number of days these days. But what I have found is that, if you take a break from Facebook and electronics, like even if it's a day, like on a weekend, like a Saturday or something like that, where you just step away from that and go outside or do something with friends or family, and, and put all of that to the side, you will find that you are so much calmer and so much more grounded. The thing is with electronics, they are very distracting. That's the first thing, obviously. The second thing is that they emit electromagnetic fields, or EMFs. So our TVs, our computers, our phones especially, all of these things do this, and it's the wireless signals. And so we're all bathed in these EMFs now, especially if we live in, a big city or somewhere that has a high population of people. And so what I recommend is stepping away from that, because these EMFs actually, well, there's some science behind this and evidence that shows that they kind of scramble our own cells in our bodies. And what's happening is, there is some evidence showing that there's cancer from EMFs, and there are all these other kinds of conditions. But I think the biggest thing is this ADD way of living. And so I find that if we can get out from under the electronic burden, we will find that we feel better about ourselves, and we feel more grounded, like I said, and less frazzled and crazy. So that's one of the
And I love that tip. I love that because, even for my clients, like one of the biggest sort of like complaints or issues is that people are constantly and chronically feeling behind, and like they haven't done enough yet, like all of this stuff. And if you have, emails chiming in every couple of minutes, of course you're going to feel behind, so like taking a conscious break from that, and like knowing where, your workday ends and your private life begins, and knowing that your private life doesn't have to happen only on the internet, but that it also has something a little bit like more of a personal component, and that self-care component that can really only happen when we're present and not when we're sort of like frazzled out into space and into, the internet. And so I think that's kind of like an important thing to mention.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's huge. I think the next thing is sort of on the staying with the whole electronics thing is light at night. So we're talking about your computer in your bed, your TV in your bedroom, staring at your phone before you go to sleep. I would love for anyone to, I know you can't really raise your hand in here, but if anyone wants to write in the chat box about that, I'd love to know who all is guilty of that, because I think that everyone at some point or another is, finds themselves laying in bed looking at Instagram or whatever it is. But the problem is that this light in your face at night, this artificial light is really unhealthy. I mean, it's actually stimulating your adrenals to think that it's daytime. So they'll just sort of continue to produce cortisol as if it's daytime. And there's no coincidence that the epidemic of sleep disorders in our modern world, especially in the US, is shocking, is happening right at this time when we're all so connected. And so I really think that the first thing is keep your room at a certain temperature around 67 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that's like 20 something degrees Celsius. I can't really remember. 22 degrees Celsius. But that apparently is the temperature range that women sleep best at. So that's the first thing. Second thing is to get rid of any of the light that you have in your room. So any kind of DVD player, anything that is emitting light, highly recommend getting rid of that. The TV as well. Just making your bedroom a sanctuary so that you can fall asleep and sleep well. Because if you're not sleeping, to me, there's no way that you can feel your best or that your hormones can be properly balanced and optimally functioning, because sleep is paramount to good health. So yeah, and then like, of course, the computer screen. So making a commitment to turn off your computer by 8 or 9 o'clock at night and not taking it into your bed with you, those kinds of things. And then also too, like brushing your teeth to candlelight or turning off as many lights as you can in your house to give your body the idea that you are, that you're winding down and that, sleep is coming. I think that's the thing. You want to prime your body.
So essentially, like what you're saying is like have a little bit of a ritual that sort of like eases from your busy day into like a sleep mode naturally, rather than expecting yourself to go from being totally on and distracted and have all this light shining at your face like it's daytime to all of a sudden really good sleep, and that really doesn't work for the natural way the body transitions from, active day to sleep time.
Yep. Way better than I did. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Because if we think about, again, I go back to evolution all the time, but it's really true. If you just think about 80 years ago, what people were doing at 9 o'clock at night, they were sleeping because that's what you did. You kind of went to bed and wound down when the sun was setting, and that's what you did. But now, I mean, like, we're just up at all crazy hours in the night, and our circadian rhythm is completely off. So you really want to get that back. And the reason I say that is because melatonin is a hormone. Melatonin is what helps you sleep. And if your melatonin production is off because your sleep patterns are off, then it's going to affect other hormones as well, because remember, all your hormones are completely interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that you bring it back to the hormones, and like basically, that melatonin production in at night being so crucial for everything else to work, because none of our hormones exist in isolation. Like, they're all connected in really intricate and really beautiful ways. And when one is off, it can easily affect something else in your body. So I think keeping that in mind, that again, like, balance is really the goal of the way we look at our health.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I know. Of course, I brought it back to hormones. How could I not?
Of course you did.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it really is.
Oh, well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for answering my kind of like three main questions that I wanted to ask you, and sort of like give us a solid foundation of these, three components, like stress, nutrition, and then these sort of more emotional things that we can do in order to support ourselves effectively. We got so many questions in, actually, from people before the call even ever started. And so I really want to make sure that we get to all of those. But before we get to that, I really want to let you all know that Nicole is coming out with a free video series called Bring Back Your Period, and it starts on Monday. So I'm super excited to be sharing that with you on Monday, the 19th, January 19th. Nicole, do you want to tell us just a little bit about what your free video series is going to be about, and even, what you specifically mean with Bring Back Your Period? Is it people who have irregular periods? Is it people who have absent periods? Who is it specifically for?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it is actually called Bring Back Your Period and Regulate Your Cycle. So it's really no, it's fine. Bring Back Your Period is fine too. I'm just clarifying for everyone so that they know that it's not just for people who might not have a period. But essentially, like I was saying, when it comes to the epic proportions of hormonal imbalances that we're seeing now, what I've found is most prevalent is women who either are not getting their period, or they are dealing with irregular periods that are really disrupting their lives. And their reasons are, there are a lot of different reasons, really, but one of the biggest reasons is coming off of hormonal birth control. And so I'm just addressing that in this video series. It's free. It's a 3-part video series. The first video comes out on Monday. So I'm going to really talk about why this is happening to women, how it's affecting our future fertility, and my top solutions for addressing an absent period or a period that's just really irregular and doesn't feel good for you. So I'm excited about that. And Caroline will share more with you on it in the follow-up email, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to send a recording tomorrow, and then I'm going to send out your video training series on Monday, because I just think that this is such a huge issue for so many people. And it's funny, like, I didn't even know how many people deal with, unpleasant, like, periods, no periods, like all that stuff, until I started experiencing that kind of thing myself and started talking about it. All of a sudden it was this influx of people and women who are dealing with similar things. And so it's actually created a really beautiful community for me, but also, it started to be a topic that we can actually actively talk about. And I think the more women who know that they don't to just deal with it, and like hope that it's going to come back, but there's actually like active things that we can do on a daily basis, is, I think, just so empowering, so I'm happy that you're doing the training series. I'm excited for it.
Me too.
All right, so we have some questions from listeners, and Jody actually sent me a couple of questions. She was asking, number one, what are your thoughts on the link between estrogen dominance and adrenal fatigue?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good one. And that, I kind of touched on that a little bit when I was talking before. But essentially, as I was saying, adrenals are the first line of defense when it comes to stress and external stress and even internal stress like food and whatnot. And when our adrenals become burned out from just this chronic stress that many of us experience, they stop producing as much cortisol, or they produce cortisol at the wrong times in the day and the night. So what happens is you end up with sleep disorders or issues falling asleep, not being able to wake up, just serious exhaustion, all kinds of other things too. Like it looks a lot like a thyroid condition. You might have irregular periods or really heavy periods. All of these kinds of things show up with adrenal fatigue. And what happens is when our bodies are in that state of alarm where we're producing a lot of cortisol, it actually dampens the production of progesterone. So cortisol will push down progesterone production because it is, it's the alpha hormone. So it's the hormone that is always going to win out in the hormonal game because we need it for survival. Like you literally need cortisol to get through a situation. Progesterone, not so much. So your body will always pull from the progesterone stores because they come from the same place. So it's going to pull from progesterone to make more cortisol if the need arises. And so for many of us, we have this state of low progesterone and estrogen that's imbalanced. And it's not even that we necessarily have too much estrogen. Some women do, but for many of us, it's just that our progesterone is too low and the two hormones no longer balance each other out. They're no longer working like in a yin and yang kind of situation. So that's really what's going on with adrenal fatigue and estrogen dominance.
Wow, so interesting. So her next question was, what do you believe is the primary driver? And so what I'm gathering from you is that adrenal fatigue and that cortisol imbalance is the primary driver that then causes something like estrogen dominance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And in addition to that too, when we're talking about your thyroid, you actually need progesterone for your thyroid to make your thyroid hormones. So of course, if cortisol is high and it pushes down progesterone and you don't have enough progesterone, your thyroid starts to struggle a little bit and can't make as much thyroid hormone as it should or needs to. And then unfortunately, you need a good amount of thyroid hormone to make progesterone. So it's funny, this whole loop is happening in our bodies and we don't really even realize it. And so again, you really have to start thinking on a bigger picture kind of basis to see, where is the imbalance starting and how can I address it from the root rather than, throwing a pill at it or doing something else, like some kind of surgery or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Jody had two other questions, and I think they kind of were already answered earlier. She asked, in regards to the above information, what in your opinion is the best path forward? And she asked, do you suggest following any specific nutritional path, paleo diet, lifestyle, like that kind of thing? And I think we answered that in our questions before, that the best path forward is to follow the nutritional recommendations that we discussed above, because they really do target stress, and stress seems to be that fundamental cause that, obviously messes with our cortisol levels and then kind of throws everything else off. And so doing that nutritional piece and then also the emotional perspective of really encouraging good sleep.
Yes, it's huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on a paleo diet? Curious.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just going to say something about that. I really try to not subscribe to labels. And so for me, I've never been, I just don't like to say, oh, I'm vegan or I'm paleo or I'm this and that, because I find that it boxes us in. And we then have to live up to the expectations of that particular diet. So I'd like to say I'm paleo-ish, or I do sort of paleo, but some days I won't eat any meat at all, and that's a vegan day. But, again, like I said, I just don't really like to necessarily label it. So, however, I do feel that a paleo lifestyle or a paleo diet or some semblance of one is really, really effective at helping women balance their hormones. And so much of that comes back to balancing our blood sugar. Because if we're chronically stressed and we're eating a vegan diet, we will find that our blood sugar is all over the place. Usually, this is not for everyone, of course, but for many people, it is. And then also I find that because they're not getting enough protein or fat in their diet, what's happening is they're losing their period. So I see that a lot as well. And again, a vegan diet works for quite a few people, and that's totally awesome. And as you said, right, Caroline, we all need to subscribe to what works for us. It's just a matter of figuring that out. But I do really like the paleo diet. I think that, as I said earlier, that combination of fat and, carbohydrates, veggies, and protein is awesome for meals to keep us feeling stable and sane, especially in the second half of our cycle where we are more prone to blood sugar instability because of the progesterone. Progesterone's higher in that second half of our cycle before our periods. So that's why we tend to want to have more sugar and cookies and things like that. So having that kind of meal every single day is really crucial, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. I love that. And I love that you re-emphasized also the idea that we all sort of have to figure out what works for us, and that something that works for you might not, exactly like that work for me, and that it's not so much about, that we can take these nutritional pieces of advice and we can try them for our own bodies, but ultimately we do have to check in with ourselves and see how we're actually feeling eating a certain thing or not eating a certain thing. And that, again, like asking yourself, it's also a really empowering piece that gives us a lot of emotional support, because we actually learn to trust ourselves and listen to our own bodies. And again, that's, I think, a huge piece in terms of, mitigating stress, like that trust that we can build in ourselves.
Right. I mean, and checking in, right? I mean, checking in with yourself, not only with the food side of things, but the stress side of things. If you feel super overwhelmed and, you're going 100 miles an hour, you want to know, why that's happening. It's likely because you are just pushing yourself too hard, but so many of us just tend to push through, which is a very masculine kind of thing to do. And it just doesn't serve us, I think, in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I want to keep us on track for time, because I know most people probably carved at an hour, and it's 6:53 right now. And we have quite a few questions left. So I'm going to ask you a few more of these, and then hopefully we can answer them in sort of like a little quick fire way, so everybody gets their questions answered. But what are some steps? So Jade is asking, what are some steps I can take to figure out my acne and how my hormones relate to it? She's 18 and she has very short cycles. They're typically around 21 days.
Okay, so Jade, I would say the first thing is, if, the acne is a symptom of an imbalance, obviously. And so with the imbalance I'm seeing right here is that it seems as if your progesterone might be a little bit low, because if your cycle is only 21 days, usually the hormone that's dominant in that second half of your cycle is progesterone. And you really ultimately want your cycle to be about 25 to 30 days. So you want to so follow the recommendations I mentioned earlier. And in addition to that, you might want to try some kind of liver cleansing. So acne, again, is a symptom of likely of an imbalance and toxins in your body that your liver and your gut are not able to process and remove. So one of the things you might want to try is milk thistle. So that's a herb that you can use, and it is very good at cleansing your liver, helping your liver make more of the good, healthy estrogens and get rid of the bad estrogens. And I think that those hormone metabolites, the excess hormones, can be really harmful for us and cause all kinds of inflammatory issues, things like acne. So milk thistle, you would take it once a day for like 8 to 12 weeks and see if that helps with that, as well as probiotics. I think probiotics would be really great for you as well, to help your gut just get rid of harmful bacteria and repopulate it with the healthy bacteria. So try those two things as well as the diet recommendations and see if that helps you.
Okay, awesome. I love that. I think That's like, I think Jade now has a whole package of little like things that she can do, and I think a lot of people struggle with acne, so that's a wonderful thing to know.
Mm.
This one's a really quick question. What's the connection between hormones and low libido?
Oh yeah, right. That's so not a quick question. I mean, there's, it's a combination of things really, what's happening. Usually it involves low estrogen, low testosterone, because those two hormones, especially testosterone, are responsible for our sex drive. And it also could involve high levels of cortisol, actually, because again, cortisol sort of supersedes our other hormones. And when we're chronically stressed, we're not in a place of having fun. We're not feeling spontaneous. We're certainly not feeling like having sex. And so what I found is that it's a matter of looking at your stress response and seeing what you can do there, but also like maybe getting your hormones tested as well to see where your estrogen and your testosterone levels are.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. We also had a question coming in from Yaya, also about acne, but she's specifically asking about cystic acne along the jawline during periods. So day 2 to 4, and then also around ovulation, so day 14 to 18. She has mild soreness in her breast from day 14 onwards, but usually doesn't have any acne or other problems during the luteal phase. So is the same recommendation that you just gave to Jade about acne also true for that hormonal acne that people only experience during certain times of their period?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that liver health and gut health are so crucial. I mean, when you think about the fact that our guts play such a big role in how, our entire bodies function. I mean, if your gut isn't functioning properly, you're not absorbing nutrients that you need. So I really think that your gut health is crucial. Your liver health is really crucial as well, because your liver is like your garbage processor. And if you're exposed to a lot of toxins, whether that's in your food, water, the environment that you're living in, your liver is constantly overburdened, and it's not able to break down those excess harmful hormones or any of the other things that are passing through there. It's not able to do its job the way it's supposed to. So you really want to help the process, and help the two phases of liver detoxification. So yes, I think the recommendations for liver and gut health, also for acne as well, a zinc deficiency, I think is another thing you should look into, and maybe taking a supplement and also getting foods that are high in zinc. For some reason, zinc is just one of those minerals that really, really helps our skin. And well, I know why it does. Basically, it's very it's very anti-inflammatory. It's also like antibacterial, antimicrobial. So you want to get zinc in your diet, and also maybe a supplement, 10 milligrams a day at the most.
Okay, awesome. And what kind of foods contain zinc?
So you want to look at nuts and seeds. So things like Brazil nuts, as well as pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, flax, those kinds of things. The biggest source of zinc is oysters. Not everybody has access to those, but that's why they say oysters are an aphrodisiac, because they are full of zinc, and zinc actually helps sperm production.
Oh,
gets a guy all going.
Good for the men, yeah.
Yep. It's good for the ladies too.
All right, awesome. So focus on liver and gut health, and then make sure that your zinc intake is appropriate and not too low, and 10 milligrams per day if people are taking a supplement.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so now we also have a question from Tamara. And by the way, Romina, I saw that you wrote a question in the chat box, and I'll definitely get to that. But I want to answer Tamara's question really quick. She writes in, I'm 44 years old. I've been pretty regular my whole life, 28 days. Now I get my periods every 4 weeks or 3 weeks. So always 21 days or 28 days. So as they became shorter. I also noticed some discharge, which is brown in color in between my periods, and it bothers her. Do you see anything unusual in what she describes? And do you think she has any, does that point to any disorders? She says she has some stressful moments sometimes, and she thinks that might affect her period. And she would love to get any diet suggestions. She's already trying to avoid sugars. She has had high TSH, so that's a thyroid hormone a few years ago, but it went back to normal.
Okay.
And what comes to mind first when you hear that someone's periods are becoming shorter and that there is discharge in between her periods?
Well, I think to break this down, the first thing is that your age. So at 44, you're typically going into perimenopause, which is the period of time before full-on menopause. And this is where ovulation is kind of sputtering a little bit. So what that means is you might be ovulating a little bit earlier or a little bit later, or you might have anovulatory cycles where you're not ovulating. And what that means is your cycle will change with that. So typically your cycle will shorten, and that seems to be what's happening here. So that's not necessarily abnormal. It's just part of this whole process. The thing that, I'm thinking about with the discharge, the brownish color, again, that is likely the lowering in progesterone. So when you do not ovulate or you ovulate sporadically, that little sac that your egg came out of, it's usually one of its main jobs is to produce progesterone when you ovulate. So if you don't ovulate, you might not produce as much progesterone. And progesterone helps to keep your uterine lining intact. And that's why it's high from the time you ovulate until the day before you get your period. It drops down. And it's that progesterone dropping that causes your uterine lining to shed. So if your progesterone is not high or not high enough or not where it's supposed to be, on day 20 of your cycle, like right in the middle of your luteal phase, that second half of your cycle, what's going to happen is, you might spot a little bit. And typically, it could be red, it could be brown, it could be anything. But the brown usually indicates to me that maybe there's stagnation, there's blood stagnation, which, again, isn't a terrible thing. But to me, what's going on is that if you're in perimenopause and your progesterone levels are going down. So that's probably what's going on there. And it's not anything to be completely freaked out about. If you wanted to test your hormones, go to a doctor, your hormones, you can do that. But if you're not trying to have a baby right now, then I think that it's fine. Also too, by the way, one more thing about the TSH. I'm sure your TSH is fine now. Usually I have people test TSH, T3, and T4 just so that you get a complete picture of what's going on with your thyroid, because TSH doesn't really give a clear picture of what's happening. But as I said, if your TSH was elevated, it's likely that your thyroid needed more TSH to produce T3 and T4. And so if your thyroid is underactive, which that kind of indicates, then it could be that your progesterone, again, is not where it's supposed to be because you need progesterone to make thyroid hormones. So you might want to, think about increasing your progesterone, which there are a couple ways you can do that. I know we're like way out of time right now, so maybe we can come back to that one and get to any other questions that we have, just so we get to everyone's questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good. And I'm sure there are probably resources on your website too about this particular case of having, too low progesterone and how we can increase that.
Oh yeah, totally. I should have said that. Yeah, I have written blog posts on this, so you can go to my site for sure.
I mean, Nicole's website is like a whole heaven of information.
You're like my biggest fan.
I am.
I love it.
Okay, so now we also have a question from Ramina, and let me see, I have something that's for some reason in the way that I can't read the question, but one second.
Okay. Oh, right. Oh, I see it here. Should I read it?
Can you read the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have, the question is, any insight into spotting between periods? I've had a hysterectomy. Oh, hysteroscopy. And doctors didn't find cysts or fibroids, and have had hormone testing with doctors and didn't find imbalances. So I don't know what hormones they tested. Okay, so the first thing I would say to you is that, unfortunately, when we have our hormones tested with a mainstream medical doctor or a conventional medical doctor, their ranges, what they're looking at when they see your test results, are very, very wide. I look at a much narrower range when I'm looking at test results, because that's considered the optimal range and it's where you want to be. Unfortunately, for a lot of women, they go to their doctors, they get tested, and they're told that everything is normal, which is infuriating because you don't feel normal. You feel like you're experiencing symptoms, whether that's physical or emotional, and you have
Oh, sorry, Nicole. Can you hear me? You just cut out. Nicole?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Okay, now you're back.
Now I'm back. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Might be my internet. I don't know. Yeah, New York City internet is amazingly bad. Okay, so yeah, I was just gonna say that with the hormones, you want to get your test results. I think I implore all women to, when they get tested, to get a copy of your test results and keep that in a file, just so you know what's normal for you and what's not normal, because test results can vary very widely, and if you have no idea what your norm is, then doctors can say, oh, you're fine, and you might not be. So that's the first thing. Find out what hormones you've had tested and just look and see on those ranges if you have, if your progesterone, for instance, is on the lower end of that range. If it is, you really want to focus on building your progesterone levels. If you're spotting between periods, because it's likely that you do not have enough progesterone in order to maintain your uterine lining. Also, if you have a lot of pain, there could potentially be some other issue happening. I don't know if they mentioned endometriosis to you, but if you do have pain, that could be another thing as well. So I don't know.
Yeah.
You can answer that, Romina, if you have a chance to. But I think that's another thing too. Endometriosis and fibroids. You said you don't have those. You don't have cysts, so those typically would cause spotting in between.
And I love that answer. And like, it underlines the fact that we don't have to be scared of our own health, but that we can really look at test results, and that we shouldn't be scared of looking at them and really becoming our own health advocates. Because just because a doctor doesn't find something doesn't mean that there can't be some sort of imbalance that is actually throwing things off, and that our symptoms aren't just showing up for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing that I say to all women. I love that you just said that, because we need to empower ourselves. We're, for the most part, in a time right now where we're not getting the answers that we need. And so we've all become sort of our own Google doctors, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
it can be dangerous.
It can kind of yes, it's not fun at all to have to go through that. But I just see here that, Romina, you said that, yes, it could potentially be lower progesterone, and yes, it is impossible to increase it. And I really think that could be going on. Can you tell me how old you are? Because I think that's obviously another part of it as well. 33. Yeah. So it typically tends to happen around this time, where these issues start to crop up, late 20s, early 30s. And usually you're not going to get the help that you need. Check out my blog though. I've written on low progesterone levels and estrogen dominance as well. So just take a look at those articles on there. If you search for progesterone and estrogen, you will find a lot of information that I've written about, and supplements as well as foods to raise your progesterone levels.
Yeah. And Romina, I just want to let you know, because I just read your little blurb also, that you went off your birth control pill 3 or 4 years ago. And I wanted just to let you know that it took me 2 years after getting off of birth control, to really get my period back on a regular cycle, and to just get everything hormonally balanced again. And Nicole's recommendations and all that stuff that we share today has been instrumental in me getting back on a regular cycle. And what I would recommend for you to also do is do, like a lot of like visualizations, in terms of, rather than, identifying with yourself as like someone who has a broken cycle or something wrong with them or whatever, really start to visualize your pelvic area and your and all of your hormones like traveling through your body in a beautiful and healthy way and all that stuff to really get your emotional state on board with that too, because I totally know how frustrating it can get and how negative we can get about our own bodies. And I think getting your emotions back on board with the results that you actually want to see and the health that you want to create for yourself is such a huge part of that journey as well. And so that has, that in combination with taking all these nutritional and supplement recommendations and stuff that we talked about today has really been, for me personally, the magic formula in terms of getting my body back to really great health and well-being. So I know you can do it. I know it sometimes takes a little bit of patience, but I have all the confidence that you're going to go back into feeling really balanced and wonderful.
That was so beautiful. It's true. I couldn't have said that better myself. It's amazing. I mean, that's all that we need to know, is that we have to have some trust in our bodies, and when we do, our bodies will trust us and give us the information that we're looking for.
Yeah. All right. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being on this call with us. We've all, I think, gotten so much out of it. I keep learning from you every single time I talk to you. And again, I want to mention to all of you guys that I'm going to email the recording out tomorrow. And then I'm going to email you again on Monday the 19th with Nicole's free video series, Bring Back Your Period. And I have no doubt that it's again going to be loaded with amazing information and tools for all of us to and really take charge of our own health, because that really is the most empowering thing I think any of us can do for ourselves. Yay. Thank you, Nicole. You're so awesome.
Thanks, Caroline. You're equally awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on this call. Thank you, ladies, for being here, asking really great questions, and just showing up to get your hormones on board.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and have a good night, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.